Hey, I'm Dawn Marie Solis with Neuro Awesome Life and EQ Solutions, and I am so excited to have with me my dear friend Melody Murray. We have been getting to know each other over the shared neurodivergent identities and uh, our love of psychology and deep ideas and making the world a better place. And I'm so excited to be able to talk with Melody because she is releasing her first book. And I've been reading it. I'm not done with it yet because I just got it a couple of days ago and I'm a really slow reader, dyslexia. Um, but I'm further into it than I expected it to be. And Melody, this book landed in my life at such a magical moment. And we'll get into that. But I want to give you an opportunity to speak for yourself and say who you are and what you're doing professionally and why you decided to write a book and all of the stuff, all the tea.
All the tea. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, a former reality TV producer, which is always surprises people. So becoming a therapist was a career switch for me in my late 30s. And I am a counselor for people 14 all the way up to, I think my most senior client is 75 right now. I do individual therapy. I used to work at a hospital emergency department where I did psych assessments. So when someone was feeling homicidal or suicidal, I would do an assessment to see if they could go home or if they needed to be hospitalized to receive crisis treatment. And I've written a book. This is my very first book. My second book is on the heels of it. I'm releasing it a month after this one comes out. This book is called Mourning the Living, when the loved one you've lost is still here. So the origins of this book are very personal. I feel like probably most books are written in that way. My older sister is a drug addict, and she was a late in life drug addict. And this was not who she was as we were growing up in our really, really tumultuous, chaotic childhood homes, because we moved around quite a bit. But my sister, we grew up and we had all the traumas. And I feel like there was a tipping point. I feel like there was a moment that she had where she just couldn't hold on any longer. She just couldn't keep every piece of her life together. And she went down the road of our mother, who was also a drug addict. And she followed our mother's path in multiple ways, unfortunately. And I had to adjust my expectations of my sister. Then I had to radically accept who she was. And then I had to create a boundary, which meant no contact unless you're sober. And it was a very, very hard, it's been a hard road, very much so. And this book is based on my relationship with my sister and how it's had to evolve over the years. I am mourning this person that was the most important person to me throughout my entire childhood, my most vulnerable time. She was the person that was there. And now she's not in my life at all. And I know why. I understand why. I understand what she's gone through. But I still mourn her. And so this book is dedicated to people who have had similar experiences where you've got love for someone, but for, one reason or a multitude of reasons, you can't coexist. And so the book is a way to learn how to manage all the emotions that come up whenever you're interacting with someone that, you don't see the world in the same way. And so the book teaches people how to create boundaries, how to maintain those boundaries, how to deal with all the emotions that come with the frustration and the sadness and the disappointment that you feel with someone that you truly do love, but you have to love them from a distance.
it just touches my heart really profoundly. As an autistic and ADHD person, I feel like relationships have always been complicated for me. But though yours and my upbringing were markedly different for a lot of different obvious and not obvious reasons, I also grew up in a home that wasn't emotionally stable or safe. And that showed up in my teen and adult relationships in every way. One of the things I really appreciated about your book is that you're offering a really deep compassion to people as they try to figure out how much patience do we offer people, how much grace do we offer people, and do we offer that patience and grace while actively involved, or is it appropriate to step away and setting our emotional and mental health up as the priority? I think today we're in a unique moment where people are trying to do that, but they're pulling the trigger on, I feel like a lot of people are pulling the trigger on abandoning the relationship a little soon, but I'm not sure. Like, I'm really excited to read more of your book because I'm not sure, right? Sorry, I have a little dog who's going to bark during this. And I'm going to get her because she's not going to stop until I catch her and hold it.
Okay.
Are you going to go out there? Okay, go out there. Aha, never mind. All right. So, one of the things that I have had to struggle with, and that I think a lot of folks who grow up with trauma, they don't, I won't speak for other people. I haven't had good ways of evaluating whether or not I'm people pleasing, whether or not I'm giving permission for others to treat me really, really badly when I think I'm supporting their journey. Right? I've done a lot of that. Right? Because you and I are both I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a coach, and I started with emotional intelligence because I saw how the lack of emotional intelligence, the lack of communication skills, people's inability to know their inner self, and how many people walk this world with this voice in their head that tells them they're not worthy, they're not right,
and it's typically not their own voice. It's something that was implanted in them by unhealthy people who raised them. And we are taught so many messages that say we're supposed to honor and respect, our father and our mother. And what if they don't honor you? What if they don't cherish you? What if they've brought harm to you? And so you've got these conflicting messages that I'm supposed to honor someone who harms me. And so then you feel bad about yourself. You feel ashamed that you're not able to live up to a certain standard. And a lot of times we don't, reverse that gaze and go, wait a second. I'm just surviving the situation that I didn't even create for myself. But what are you doing, mom or dad? What are you doing to ensure that you and I have this mutually respectful relationship? And so there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame when you say to someone, yeah, I haven't spoken to my dad in years. I have no idea what's going on with him. I have a story in the book where someone says, I don't know if my brother is dead or alive. I have no idea what is going on. We've just had to let each other go. And there's a lot of shame that comes with that. And I don't think that people understand that whenever they're lobbing their judgments of, but why? Blood is thicker than water, but that's your mom, but that's your dad. And it's so dismissive and it's so disrespectful. And, you know, and it's such a personal situation. Like, how do you confront that judgment? You know, and I really wish people were more mindful of the things that they would say to other people in these really sensitive moments.
Yeah, and as a parent of 3 now adult children, and we all figured out our neurodivergent identities and our mental health as adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're late to the party of being healthy people.
Mm-hmm. So was I. So was I. I didn't start therapy until I was 32, 31, 32, late to the party.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know from now being very immersed in neurodivergent community, so many of us, especially those of us who either identify as female or are sex female at birth, the way we are taught to exist in the world is not beneficial to mental health.
Not at all. Our world is not set up for us to be joyful people. Our world is not set up that way. Our world is set up so that we are insecure about everything, and that we're constantly needing to grab and have and do and buy in order to be worthy. It's our world is not set up for us to be mentally healthy.
Yeah, and at least in Western culture, or maybe I'll stick to United States culture because that's my experience. We're taught to both need each other and fear each other, to be in competition with one another, to the toxicity with which we are brainwashed from childhood up, the ways in which we have to figure out how to be in society, in work, in faith community. Good Lord, there are a lot of rules. And I think especially for autistic people who work really, really hard to figure out what the rules are, because it's a stabilizing thing. Anything that's consistent and repeatable is stabilizing. Even though many of us are very rule resistant. Like, we learn the rules, but we don't like them. Right? And many of us are very good at figuring out how to get around them or break them without getting in too much trouble, right?
I feel like it's a major characteristic of my personality. I want to get around the rules, but I need to know them. But you're so right. I just want to add a little something to what you said. There are so many rules that we're all being told to live by, but these rules only serve a sliver of the population.
And they only serve even that sliver in a very specific way. And this is a whole other conversation for another day, which I'd love to have with you. Because I feel like even what we view as service to this sliver of population, I personally believe has been a huge disservice, right? We've set up a false paradigm for success, a false paradigm for well-being and thriving. And it doesn't, I don't personally believe it serves any of us, but because we have this false paradigm, we believe that it does, right? There's a small section of the population that has the wealth, that has there's a small segment of the population that has, and then there's a diminishing effect throughout the rest of the population.
True.
And the rules as they are applied, again, have the reverse, right? They have greater impact as you go through the population. And I think these sorts of things, this false sense of what thriving looks like, what relationships look like, what health looks like, all of it creates an almost a sense of inability to be able to judge, is my relationship healthy? What is my responsibility to create health within myself and within my relationships? And what responsibility can I ask or even require from the people who I try to be in relationship with? And I think that's one of the things that I'm really enjoying, being able to follow your thought process in your book, is that you're giving opportunity through not only research and your personal lived experience, but also through permission given, very important, permission given, privacy maintained explanations of some of your clients' journeys. One thing that I continue to be astounded by, though, because of what I know about childhood trauma and how it affects our brains and our genetics and all of that stuff, it makes sense. But you started off in a very traditionally thriving kind of way. You were involved in television, you were a producer, you were doing the life, and you chose to step away from that, go back to school, and focus on
healing,
therapy.
Healing.
What was that decision journey like for you?
I had, and this is interesting, I'm thinking like I could have added a story about myself in the book. Each chapter in the book is a different relationship dynamic. It starts with fathers, then it goes to mothers, children, siblings, partners, friends, and the very last chapter is identity. And it's a reckoning. It's like, this is what I was given, this is how I'm handling the situation. And does this work for me? Whatever the situation is, does this work? And I had a great time as a producer. I traveled all over the world on somebody else's dime, which is makes it even sweeter. It was amazing and it was fun for a very long time, until I did 2 shows back to back and had very, very different experiences in both projects. The first project, the main person on the show was doing her own personal therapy on camera. I had not thought about becoming a therapist. I was in my own therapy, but I hadn't thought about being a therapist. But it's funny because the very first show I ever produced had 2 therapists as the host of the show. And then one of the very last show that I ever produced had the on-camera person doing therapy on camera. So it was an interesting cycle there, connection there. But I'm watching this woman do therapy with a therapist, and my brain, I'm thinking they're tiptoeing around some really, really serious information. And there's I don't know going on with both people, the therapist and the on-camera person. And it just felt like bullshit to me. It felt so false and it felt exploitive and insincere. It just didn't feel right. And then I really started taking a look at how the production was going and how unethical the interactions were happening between people on the crew, between people on camera, and just things that I'd never ever seen before. And it's like I just had this gross feeling about myself that now my name is attached to this. I don't want to be involved in this. I don't want to be known for this. And so I quit. But a couple of weeks before I quit, a part of the buildup was an off day that I had, and I'm naturally an early riser. I wake up without issue at 5 or 6 o'clock every morning. Just boom, I am awake. And on an off day, I couldn't get out of bed until like 1 in the afternoon. That said so much to me. I was awake, but I just had no motivation to get up and invite and enjoy the world. And this is an off day. And, you know, TV hours are, you're working 16, 18 hours a day. And I couldn't move. And that's when I said, I have to do something else. I can't do this shit anymore. I can't do this crap anymore. But what am I going to do? What is it going to be? And I just kept rolling around and thinking and really pushing myself. And I said, what is bothering me about the scenario? What is it that I want to do? Where do I find value? And I thought, boom, that's it. I'm going to be a therapist. That's it. And so I set an appointment because I was out on the road. I reached out to my therapist and I said, I'm wrapping this show on this particular day. I need to see you before I take off for the next one. And I went into my session and I said, here, I got to bring something up to you. I have this idea, but I need you to tell me if I'm too crazy to do it. And he says, what is it? And I said, I think I'm going to walk away from producing so that I can become a therapist. Am I too crazy? And he goes, no, I think you'd be brilliant. I think you'd be brilliant. So healing became my goal. Like, I want people to feel better as fast as possible. And he was the reason why I felt so much better about me and how I grew up, and not taking things personally and not being ashamed about situations that I did not create. I turned that shame into pride that I survived so much crap. And that was a big turning point for me. It's like, why do I feel shame about scenarios I did not put into place? And so that's why the book starts with, why is it so hard for us to be in relationship with people? Why is it so hard for us to create boundaries? Why? And trauma is a big part of that. So I go into trauma and talk about how we see ourselves. I go into attachment. Why do we attach the way we attach? And then after and then stressing self-care, that's the first part of the book, is why is it so difficult for us to do this thing that we are all told that we need to do, which is connect with people. But why is it that it's been so hard for us to connect with these particular people, which are the closest people to us? And then I talk about self-care, like, you're about to embark on a journey so that you can take care of yourself as you're in relationship with other people. But you have to really make sure that you have a self-care routine in place, because you're about to do some deep digging into yourself and deep dives into your connections with people. It's not easy, but it's necessary if you don't want to always be punishing yourself because you don't feel a certain way about somebody, and that somebody has hurt you consistently, yet you still feel that you have to hold yourself up to a certain standard of behavior, but that person is like a wrecking ball. And how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile that this is my mother who's supposed to love me more than anybody, and she has hurt me more than everyone? These are hard conversations to have, but they're necessary conversations to have so that you can rightly divide responsibility. What belongs to the other person? What belongs to me? What do I need to be responsible for in doing so that we can either coexist or be done with each other in a respectful way? And so the book gives tips. There's tons of interventions in it. In each chapter, there are different ways that you learn and how to interact with people. And at the very end of the book, there's just tons of resources, which include multiple therapeutic modalities, so that if there's something within the book that has touched you, you get to get a peek into all of these different ways that a therapist can help you. And then there's even a section where it's like, if you don't want to go to therapy route, you don't have to. Here are all the things that you can do safely on your own to have your healing journey kickstarted faster. Because I know therapy is not cheap. And it's not accessible to a lot of people for a multitude of reasons. Some of it's financial, some of it's just distance and geography, and some of it's cultural. Like, you're just not comfortable talking to a stranger about what's going on. So there are ways around that so that you can heal yourself in relationship with other people.
I really appreciate that. Making sure I'm no longer muted. Okay, good. I really appreciate that there's that combination in the book. One of the things that I found when I entered my therapy journey was not every therapist understands how to help me as an individual. And I know that for many neurodivergent people, including myself, finding adequate mental and physical health care can be downright exhausting, debilitatingly exhausting.
When you're in your, and typically you're seeking out care when you're at your most vulnerable because something has happened in your life. So you are that much more depleted of energy to, embark on this search.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's difficult is that the Hollywood version of therapy is talk therapy, and there's great value in talk therapy, but there are so many other versions of therapy. And with my specific combination of neurotypes, I'm not just autistic and ADHD, I'm a whole slew of other things, including mental health things. Talk therapy was not the place to start. And I joke about it because that's my way of coping, but I literally break therapists. My life has been hard enough that people get to me at about 6 or 7 years old because everybody wants me to start at the freaking beginning, right? I get to about 6 or 7 years old when people stop either believing my story, right? Disbelieving I'm capable of doing life, or they're so emotionally sucked into how hard things have been for me that they're now feeling too much of the situation. And when I started my therapy journey, I got much worse before I found somebody who could help me get better. And if it hadn't been for my own personal resilience, which not everybody has.
And that's an assumption. There's an assumption that everyone is resilient. No, that is not true.
No.
You have to work on that. Build those skills. You're not born resilient. We have to build those skills in ourselves and in children. We have to build it.
I'm going to try letting the puppy back in. You're being very distracting. I'm not enjoying this at all. Come here. Come say hello.
Sweet pea. Oh my goodness.
This is Chloe. Chloe does not understand being away from me. Because she's training to be my service dog, so she's with me a lot. So the closed door was too distracting for me, and evidently upsetting to her. So we're gonna,
little baby.
Yes, thank you. I know I was separate from you. It was terrible.
So, Dawn Marie, you bring up a really good point, Dawn Marie, about the healing journey for you. It was worse before it got better. I speak in the book, I don't know if you've gotten to that part yet, but actually I talk about it multiple times about how not all therapists are good therapists. And there is an assumption from many people thinking that every single therapist knows how to work in every single population and knows how to handle every single issue. And that is absolutely not true. There are some crappy therapists out there doing serious damage. And a lot of times they don't even know they're doing damage.
Right.
They don't realize it, but you have to get specialized training to work in trauma. And you have to get that, you have to attain that training all on your own. You pay for it out of pocket. That's not something that's taught in graduate school, which I did not know until I was in graduate school. But there are a lot of therapists that do not know how to work with trauma, and they're doing it And there's an assumption from the person that's seeking help that, hey, you're the expert in the scenario. I'm walking in with, everything on the table. And there are some therapists that do not know what is going on, and they are doing harm because they're opening up all of this old stuff. And that's not how you start trauma therapy. You do not start trauma therapy with going, okay, tell me your trauma. What's the worst, all the horrible things that happened to you? That if that ever happens to you, anyone that's listening to this, anyone that's watching this, if you know you've experienced some trauma and the first session or two of your session, your therapist says, okay, we're diving into the hard stuff right out of the gate, run.
Thank you for saying that.
Run. That is not how you start trauma therapy.
Yeah, it's almost like this is going to be too judgy. But it almost feels like gossip curiosity.
Yep.
If that makes sense. Like, tell me the juicy bits first. It's too much curiosity. I have because of my background. So my background started, I started researching different ways of learning when I was in college. Before the idea that people learned differently was really accepted or even known, right? I had to get special permission from my school to do more independent study than was normally granted and all of that because of my own experience. I knew people learned differently. I had a very specific experience, especially with math, where one person could teach me how to do it and I was successful, and another person I was literally failing. But the person I was failing with was teaching the way I had to do it for the test. And I pushed back on that. I said, I can learn and do this way. Is this way valid? Yes, it is. Then why can't I do it this way? The state won't accept that methodology on the test, right? So I knew from personal experience, also I knew at 15 I was dyslexic, right? I knew there were differences about me that standard education was not helping me with. I graduated second in my class believing I was barely capable of going to college. I applied to schools that had almost no barrier to entry, and that was it. The places I really wanted to go, I had no courage for, right? But gratefully, I transferred, I ended up in a really good school. And I did this research. When I got to starting therapy, which was in my late 40s, I was blown away that no one tried to get to know me in my processing, right? How do you take in information? How do you process that information? And how do you communicate it back? No one seemed to even recognize that that was important. And for me, that's all important. If you don't know how that individual is processing their environment and their experiences, you can't figure out how to interact with them. That's my opinion. So for me, my theory is therapy needs to start at getting to know the neurotypes and the learning modalities of the individual, because then you can design therapy that might work for that individual because you know how you know what their brain's capable of, you know how they're going to process. You're going to trip over if they're rejection sensitive. You might find out if they have pathological demand avoidance. You're going to find those things out early on, instead of diving right into trying to be therapeutically helpful, where you might do it all wrong.
Well, and you haven't established a trusting relationship. Therapeutic relationships are extremely important to be based in trust. And if I don't know you, like you don't even know me, how am I going to spill my guts to you? We don't know each other yet. So that's another reason why I think it's really important to be mindful of who is your therapist. And the book is structured in the way that I do therapy, which I didn't even realize until now as we're talking and I'm listening to you talk. I am a trauma therapist. That is my expertise. And so the book is structured in the way that I do therapy with my clients, which is it starts with getting to know you. And so the book starts with psychoeducation, where I'm educating you on different ways of thinking and how to conceptualize what you could be going through and why your relationships are a certain way. It's like becoming self-aware. And so it starts that way. You get to get a sense of who I am and my personality. And then you're reading about how people bond, how you could be attached, how you should view how you grew up in your family of origin. It's all just education. Then I go into self-care. We can't do all this stuff because we're going to be raking up a lot of memories. I can't have you being triggered out there without knowing how to handle yourself. That's the self-care. And so I really emphasize having a self-care routine that is solid. And only when I get a sense that you know how to take care of yourself when you're out there and you have panic attacks and you have meltdowns, you have shutdowns. When I know that you're saying that you're going through these things and you're telling me all of these different things that you're doing to bring yourself back to a grounded space, then we go there. So the first part of the book is education. It's you figuring out, how do you fall in line with a family dynamic? What was your family structure when you were growing up? Okay, now we're shifting into what can you do to take care of yourself? You've got to create a routine of how you are going to take care of yourself every day, every month, every minute, if necessary. Then we dive into your story. But then I still do a check. I do a temperature check before we go there, just to assess, how are you feeling? Do you feel comfortable with me? We're going to start talking about this thing, but not yet. We're going to wait a few weeks because I want to get out whatever your concerns are before we go there. Again, because I do that in the initial consultation before I even talk to someone. I do a consultation and I ask them, what's going on with you? Why do you want therapy in your life right here, right now? So then I do another temperature check before we dive into the stuff. How are you feeling? How are you doing? What's happening? And I always ask people, who are your supports? What is your support system? Who do you reach out to when stuff goes down? And if you don't have those people, then we work on building you your support team, again, before we dive into your stuff. Because I need to make sure that you are the strongest you can be right now as we're having these conversations, because memories are going to come up. Your dreams could be altered. It's a deep process that really needs to be respected for how difficult it is for someone to say, I'm ready to talk about these things, and to make that phone call, to email that therapist. And it's such a difficult situation. And one of the things that drives me crazy about whenever I'm working with people is they tell me that, oh, I reached out to a bunch of therapists and nobody called me back. That's disheartening. And what I'd like to say on that, like, some people do it a lot of times. Therapists are working every single hour and you're not picking up your phone when you're working with other clients. So that's one reason why people aren't picking up the phone, because they're in session with other clients. Another reason why people don't pick up the phone is because if they're completely full, there's no room for them to fit you into their schedule. So they're not going to call you back, because there's no way for me. I don't have time to call people back to say, hey, I don't have time to see you. So that's the route that some therapists take. I reach out to people and go, hey, I'm sorry, I don't have enough room, so they can keep looking. And so that's when you're looking for a therapist, go to the therapist website, read what they say about themselves. When you talk to them, ask them what training they have. Be specific about what you want to work on, to see if they've ever done anything, any kind of work along those lines before. Educate yourself, and do research. And then, you dive in. But you have to be patient with yourself, and you have to be patient with the therapist, that you are building a relationship. And if you don't feel a click pay attention to that. Because again, we're not all the same and we don't all have the same personalities. And another complaint that I get from potential clients is they always ask me, how do you work? What do you do? How do you work? And I'm very direct. I don't waste time. If I see something, if I feel something, if I sense something, I'm throwing it out there at you so I can figure out, like, am I on track? But I'm very interactive. Very interactive. I ask you questions. I want to know what's on your mind, what's on your heart. What were you thinking? What were you feeling when this went down? What did you do? What didn't you do? What do you wish you could have done? I am very, very involved. And there are a lot of therapists that aren't. There are a lot of therapists that do that old school Sigmund Freud way where they just sit there and they let you talk and they give you zero feedback. That works for some clients. That does not work for me as a client and as a therapist. That doesn't work for me. So that's why it's really important to know that try out multiple therapists until you find the one that you click with. Have multiple sessions with a therapist. We don't have, hold on. I was going to make a generalized statement that does not fit necessarily. But we know that clicking is very important. So we're typically not going to take it personally. If it's not working, that's okay. The goal is for me, the goal is a healed planet. And if you're not going to be healed with me, you're going to be healed with somebody, my fingers are crossed. It doesn't have to be me. I'm not for everybody. Just like not everybody is your friend, not everybody's going to click with you as your therapist. So do a couple of sessions with a few different people if you can. And then make a decision with whoever you feel most comfortable with. Therapy has to fit into your life. It shouldn't feel like a burden. I'm not saying it's not going to be easy. It's not a vacation. It's hard work, but it's necessary and it is so worth it. Whenever you really get into it and you start feeling better, it's worth it. It really is worth having difficult conversations with other people, but most importantly, yourself. Have boundaries. This book is boundary heavy. It's very much about creating boundaries so that you are protected as you interact with people. And the first boundaries you need to set are the boundaries with yourself so that you're not being codependent, so that you're not people pleasing, so that you're not being a doormat for people just because you're related or just because you're neighbors or just because you're coworkers. You need to create boundaries with yourself so that you can respect yourself as you're interacting with people within relationships.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, which kind of breaks my heart. So you need to come back and talk to me more.
I would do that in a heartbeat.
To wrap up, what are you hoping? I mean, obviously you hope readers are benefited. Obviously, you wouldn't have written the book otherwise. But is there something specific that is going to make you feel like, okay, the work, the effort, the personal growth that it takes to write a book was worth it if this happens for at least one person?
My goal for the book is the same as my goal with every single client that I work with, which is, as life is lifing, you are handling yourself in ways that prove to you that you love and respect yourself. You're feeling stronger and more confident as you're interacting with people. And your responses to situations aren't reactions anymore. They are responses because you know that you can take time, you can take a pause, and you can breathe through a situation, and then you can say what you need to say that benefits you and serves you. So it's that confidence, the strength that I want people to feel as they're in relationship with the people that are around them, but most importantly, the relationship with yourself. That's the key.
I wasn't unmuted. I don't have the right setup. I have all the stuff, but we just moved. I don't have the right setup. So I've got like a screen here and a screen here, and I have to keep looking over the screen. Anyway, I love what you just said. I think And it's why I started in emotional intelligence work. We don't get taught how to have that relationship with ourselves.
Especially women. Women are taught to sacrifice yourself for everyone else. And that's what makes you a good woman. That's what makes you a good mom, a good wife, is if you are giving all of yourself to everyone else.
Yeah, and I think the way it goes very poorly for more masculine identities is that when you get taught that your perspective pretty much is the only one that matters, but you don't get given any permission or help understanding your inner being, that becomes an accidental or purposeful design of dominance and even abuse. And so I personally know individuals who are raised in that sense of masculinity that have felt devastated by it because they have no idea how to be themselves in the world. And so I think for very different reasons, we have like this entire population, regardless of sex or gender identities, that just really has no clue how to be themselves.
That's why I put together that identity chapter. That's why I put it in. And there's stories in there about people who've gone from being an alcoholic to sober, who've gone from obese to, the more ideal weight for her. One person has gone from being born male to now trans female. And she talks about that. She talks about, I was this person for so long, but I didn't know how to be this person. But what I knew about being a man, I did not like. And here are the reasons why. And now I'm a woman, but I'm a woman now at almost 70 years old. And so there's so many parts of being a woman that I never experienced before. And my view of men and who I used to be is such a skewed, dark view because men are given so many erroneous messages and about themselves and how they're supposed to be in a relationship with other people. And it's sad. It's so sad, the negative message that people are given, and how whenever there's an internal conflict, whenever there's frustration or sadness, we internalize it and we think we have done something wrong. It's like, no, you were given a certain programming. You were given certain messages that no one should have ever gotten. But the people that gave you those messages, the people that gave it to them were also hurt and unhealed and flawed. And so it's just this chain reaction. It's this cycle that needs to be broken so that we can all feel confident and just being who we are, not connected to the script that other people were given. You have a right to decide what your life is going to look like and who you're going to be in this world. And it doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. And it doesn't need to look like the identity somebody else had in mind for you. Their life, their identity can be whatever they do with their life, but you have a right to shift the way you do things for yourself.
That's awesome. We have to go. We both have other appointments, but thank you, Melody, for being here and for sharing your brilliant, beautiful mind. And I hope people get your book. I'll make sure there's a link to it. Right this second, it'll be pre-order, but I think you said to me that October 11th might be the launch date.
October 11th is the launch date. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. And we will talk again soon.
Thank you, Dawn Marie. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.